and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Every week.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And in the news this week, yet another court victory on same-sex marriage, this time in Louisiana.
But watch out for that bad ENDA bill, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, the one with the broad religious exemption. There's a bad rumor that it's going to be added to a defense bill in the lame duck period.
In that gay bashing in Philadelphia that we told you about last week, they've arrested 3 people and charged them. And also there's a new push for the hate crimes bill, during which a legislator has just come out.
A tripartite story. Billboards proclaiming that God loves gays are too controversial for some ad companies.
A Catholic church in Montana has barred a gay married couple from going to communion, but that's not the end of it. What else are they doing? Wait till you hear what the priest wants them to do to make amends for their sins.
The ACLU and Chelsea Manning have filed suit against the Defense Department and Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, demanding appropriate gender transition treatment for Chelsea.
President Obama, who can do some nice things, nominated an anti-gay guy to be a judge, part of a deal with the Republicans, but the Senate, Democrats of course, are not having it.
As we taped last week, drag queens in San Francisco were about to meet with Facebook, which was threatening to remove their profiles. Guess what? Facebook has not given in. We'll give you the details on that.
We'll tell you about the gall of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy.
He's opposed to same-sex marriage.
Imagine that.
Yeah. One San Francisco political leader gets same-sex married, and another one comes out about using pre-exposure prophylaxis.
I will review Booty Candy. Booty Candy. This is at Playwrights Horizon. It's a black comedy.
And we are celebrating Bisexual Awareness Week. We'll give you some information about that. But we start in Louisiana. Now, just a week or two ago, we were telling you about a bad marriage decision by a federal judge there, who's an outlier as the first in a long time to rule against the right to same-sex marriage.
Well, that, of course, happened because I was out of the country.
But now a state court judge in Louisiana has done the opposite.
Edward Rubin is his name, and he struck down the ban on same-sex marriage on September 22nd. He says it violates, are you ready, the Due Process Clause, the Equal Protection Clause, and, notably, the Full Faith and Credit Clause, and Santa Claus. No, that's the last part's not true. Now, this is the
Bear Clause.
This is the case of a couple that was married in California, and
lesbian couple. They are sued Louisiana for recognition of their California marriage and for the right of the non-biological mother of their child to be the second parent adopter of the child.
Now, the interesting thing here is they're saying that Judge Rubin's decision has precedence here because the federal government can't control state law?
I don't get it. I'm sure they will figure out a way to sort this out. I can't, I haven't read anything that explains it to me, but I'm thrilled that a state court judge feels that he can make this ruling in spite of the ruling by the federal judge. And you're right, the full faith and credit part of this is the really interesting part, because go back to the Defense of Marriage Act. It had 2 operative clauses. One was that the federal government was not required to recognize same-sex marriages. That's what was overturned by the Windsor case.
Well, I think it said that the federal government does not recognize same-sex marriages.
Correct, and that was overturned by the Windsor case by the Supreme Court a little over a year ago. But the second operative clause of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, was that states do not have to recognize same-sex marriages performed legally in other states.
They could if they want to, but they don't have to.
And
in other words, and they were saying Congress has the right to set the parameters of what the full faith and credit clause says.
Essentially. And the choice made by the LGBT legal establishment, as all this has proceeded through the courts, was not to go after that part of DOMA immediately, but to focus on the federal recognition and federal benefits. Left hanging is this business of full faith and credit, and whether that is constitutional to say to states, you don't have to recognize laws. Now, what this judge in Louisiana said was he went back to a couple of older cases that had nothing to do with same-sex marriage, but that looked at the question of full faith and credit. And what courts have decided over the years is that while there is no maybe constitutional mandate that all laws must be the same in all states, there has been judicial ruling that in general, states must give full faith and credit to the legal proceedings of other states. And that is what this judge decided in this case. And this could be really important for overturning that clause in the Defense of Marriage Act.
The thing is, and a lot of these same-sex marriage cases are not originated by people who want to get married in Louisiana or these other states. They're originated by people who were married elsewhere, and they want their state to recognize it.
In fact, it's been quite stunning the extent to which the courts, both state courts and federal courts in the states, have mandated recognition of out-of-state marriages when that part of DOMA still exists that says states don't have to recognize each other's marriages.
Now, did we talk about the Texas license case last week?
No, we can go to that right now
well,
if you want.
because it kind of relates to this. So in Texas, Connie Wilson is a woman who moved from California with her wife and was stopped from getting a driver's license under her married name because they say we don't recognize her marriage and therefore we don't recognize her name change that was accomplished in California. Well, it's pure meanness.
Yes, it is.
She can get her name changed for $500, but she won't do that. She's going to go to court and she's going to file a lawsuit, and she wants to be treated like everybody else.
What they realized as she handed over her documents was her married name was on her California driver's license, which should have been enough right there to do the new license in Texas. But she also handed over her birth certificate, and that name did not match her married name. And they said that is the key.
Yes. But if California has changed your name, that at least ought to be recognized, even if you are trying to preserve the sanctity of marriage in Texas.
It shouldn't have anything to do with whether it's a marriage name change. It's just your name has changed.
In another state. They ought to at least give recognition to that. Well, and they may.
They may. We may end up winning that. But thank you to the Louisiana state judge who has pushed us forward on that. Meanwhile, there's the Colorado case pushing for same-sex marriage is on hold at the 10th Circuit. They've decided not to pursue that at the moment since the 10th Circuit has already legalized same-sex marriage in Oklahoma and Utah, but all of that is on hold waiting for the Supreme Court, so they're just going to leave the Colorado case on hold rather than deciding it.
And we should remind you that in a matter of this week, I guess, on the 29th of September, the court is going to have their first discussion about the 7 cases that they're looking at and decide whether or not to take them.
Which they may or may not announce immediately. And in the last week, Justice Elena Kagan performed a same-sex wedding ceremony for an ex-clerk of hers, Mitchell Reich, and his new husband, Patrick Pearsall. A right-winger in Arkansas is now demanding that she and Justice Ginsburg recuse themselves from the marriage cases because they have performed same-sex marriages.
And I would like all the Catholics on the court, and that's most of them, to recuse themselves because they're from a religion that teaches that this is wrong.
Exactly.
How's that?
You start getting to that level of recusal, and we'll have no one deciding any cases.
But just to remind people, what the court could do, what almost seems likely to do in this case, and you can never predict, but
and yet you're about to.
Yes, but well, what are we here for? But I'm just saying, in terms of getting people's hopes up or anything like that, it sounds like the direction that a lot of them want it to go is let those district court things stand, let the marriages go into effect in those districts because they're not ready to rule.
But you leave out an important step, because they have to do something for the marriages to go into effect. They have to deny the writs of certiorari.
Right.
And they're not about to do that.
Well,
and they're waiting to see what happens in the Sixth Circuit. They're waiting to see what happens in other circuits that haven't ruled
So they can
yet.
withhold their votes in the conference, say we're not ready to vote? Because if four people vote to take it,
yes,
it's
taken. They can decide not to vote yet. They can decide. They can decide to take them and not announce it yet.
Justice delayed is justice denied. I'm serious. A lot of people are suffering out there.
Yes, exactly. It's ridiculous that these rulings are on hold when same-sex marriage is legal in 19 states in the District of Columbia. So you might want to consider going to one of those jurisdictions to get married if this is on hold in your state.
Larry Crane thinks it's ridiculous.
Oh, he's my hero of the week.
Well, then you talk about Larry.
Larry Crane is the county clerk of Pulaski County, Arkansas.
That's where Little Rock is. That's where my sister lives and much of her family.
Because he, and that's a nice quote from him on that picture we have up, I believe that a majority can't exercise tyranny against the minority of a fundamental right. More quotes from him in a second. He is, in fact, the defendant in the Arkansas marriage cases in his role as county clerk, but he supports same-sex marriage. And he gave an interview that had some really, really wonderful quotes, which is why he's my hero of the week. He says the ban on same-sex marriage targets a minority to strip them of rights for no other reason than to protect the majority from unfounded and irrational fears or to impose a majoritarian morality. He says, I am humbled. He issued, when there was a pro-marriage ruling in May, he issued hundreds of licenses, and people did get married, but that's all on hold now, as in so many of these other states.
Like in Utah.
He says, I'm humbled and honored to be part of it. These people have been waiting their whole lives for equal treatment, and let justice roll down from the mountains like water.
You didn't have to tell me there were nice people in Arkansas. I'm an Arkansas traveler. I represent the state around the country.
I think there are nice people everywhere, as we know because we have viewers everywhere. But it's just the question of who's in power and what they're doing with it.
Governor Clinton appointed me as an Arkansas traveler. I can show you the certificate. All right. But in Iowa, they want to go backwards. They are, because Republicans may take over both houses of the legislature in this session, and they got the governor already, they're talking of passing a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage in a state that has had legal same-sex marriage since 2009 under a judicial order. And they could do this.
These people are relentless and shameless, and they're not giving up, and we're going to have to fight this for a long time as we are continuing to fight to defend women's reproductive rights. And a million other things, and these fights just never seem to end. And also going backwards is a Catholic church, St. Leo's in Lewiston, Montana, where
St. Leo the Great.
An older male couple, Paul and Tom,
73 and 66,
living in Lewiston. They went to the state of Washington to get married.
Because they were living in sin.
Yes, they went to Seattle. Now they have been they've been together 30 years. They went to Seattle and got married. They're longtime members of this Catholic church, St. Leo's. Very active. So a new priest comes in, who's what, 27?
His name is Sam. I don't have his age. His name is Samuel Sperling. We should say this villain's name.
And these Paul and Tom did not publicize their marriage, but you know they're people in the town. It's a small town.
People
and,
talk.
People know them. They're valued members of the community and the church. And the new priest heard about them and about their marriage, and he called them in. And he said,
Did you get married?
You are not allowed to take communion anymore. You are getting kicked out of this church. unless you divorce, stop living together, and sign a letter renouncing the idea of same-sex marriage.
Love is strange. That's kind of the plot of it.
And he says, the priest says, this is not about animus against homosexuals. I'm just upholding Catholic teaching.
So to some extent, people are in an uproar over this, and the bishop meets with the 300 parishioners over this, and they are divided over this.
Yes.
Some supporting, but the thing is, folks, if you're really divided, you got to stand up and say, you got to get rid of Samuel Sperling off. Get rid of him.
Well, some people have left the congregation over this, and
but let me tell you something about communion and Samuel Sperling.
Okay.
Another thing that he has done in the church is they used to give communion with locally sourced wheat bread that they made.
Nice.
And they did that, and that's how people took communion. He has banned this practice. It's gone back to this pasty wafer that we grew up with in the Catholic Church that is, it's this solid thing that dissolves in your mouth and it bears very little relationship to bread. Why did he do this? Because if you use that wheat bread, a crumb could go on the floor and you'd be stepping on Jesus. He said this. So no more of that. Now let me just say something to anybody who's troubled. But Paul and Tom, you want to take...
And they think witchcraft is bad.
You want to take, our friend Bernard Lynch,
yes.
who is a Catholic priest and gay and has a husband and everything. When he starts a meal, he takes a piece of bread. This is what communion is. He takes a piece of bread, everybody grabs a little hold of it, and we break bread together in communion. That's what communion is, not the mumbo jumbo and the hocus pocus. And by the way, that's where the term hocus pocus comes from the words that you say over the bread, which is hoc est corpus meum, hocus pocus, the magic trick. So, just do it with yourselves, do it at your table, share table fellowship. Don't depend for your happiness on what Reverend Samuel Sperling says.
And lest you think we are emphasizing too harshly the Catholic Church, here's an update from Fred Karger, our favorite Republican ex-presidential candidate. He, this week, released a new set of documents on the work of the Mormon Church, with a little help from the Catholics, about how they wrote and passed Proposition 22 in California in 2000, which mandated no recognition of out-of-state marriages. That passed 61 to 39%. They started in 1996 working on this. The Mormon Church worked on this for 4 years in California while hiding all their contributions, as they did in the Prop 8 case. Fred is continuing to look for evidence of political work by the Mormon Church, and if you have any little information to give him, you can send it to tips@mormontips.com. He'll be very happy to make use of that.
In Mississippi, Governor Phil Bryant, I met him this summer at the Mississippi Picnic in Central Park, is being represented by the Alliance Defense Fund. He's trying to intervene to stop a DeSoto County woman who married elsewhere and is seeking a divorce in Mississippi. The High Court has approved his intervention there. He has an out gay son whose rights he does not respect. The couple could go to California to divorce, where they got married, but then again, like the Texas woman, they don't want to do that. They want to make it happen here.
There are often residency requirements for divorce. I don't know if that's absolutely true in this case, but it can be quite a burden to have to go back to the state where you were married. And of course, that's never required of heterosexuals. Missouri, there are oral arguments this week. After we tape, 10 couples are suing for the right of recognition of their marriages from other places.
This will happen in Jackson County Circuit Court in Kansas City. In California, now you can't get married in Arizona, right?
Right.
So a couple there went to get married at Coronado, which is outside of San Diego, right?
It's across a bridge. It's a Republican enclave in the area of San Diego.
They're having a nice ceremony on the lawn with their friends who are in from all over the country. And then all of a sudden, this shouting emerges from the hotel of homos go home, interrupting the ceremony. They're kind of devastated about this. They can't get this out of their heads. But it does have a nice ending because the hotel has invited them back with the band and everybody else, and we'll do it all over again, and we'll keep the bigots away.
They're still looking for the guy who was shouting from the condo complex.
Well, it's not illegal.
It's
just
it's
nasty.
interesting. They're investigating whether it's a hate crime and should be prosecuted as some kind of assault, or whether it is allowable free speech. So that's an interesting question. More on that in a minute when we get to Philadelphia.
It's an awful thing to do. It's despicable.
It is. And the 11th Circuit is beginning the process of hearing the Florida case. We've told you about all the local and state cases in Florida, and finally the federal district court there is taking up the question of marriage. Slowly but surely, every federal circuit in this country is taking up the marriage question.
And the Census Bureau is starting to officially count us. It's their first official data on same-sex married couples.
They've been counting same-sex couples living together for the last 2 or 3 censuses.
Now, overall, the percentage of those married in this country went down slightly again in this thing. It's an historic trend since 1960, which is before homosexuality was even invented. But the Bureau estimates that there are 252,000 households headed by same-sex married couples in 2013 out of 56 million married couples.
Half of 1% that they've recorded so far.
We'll catch up.
Oh, we're getting there. But, we used to joke about the fact that, same-sex couples are going to save marriage. We're the last ones who really want to get married. Well, in fact, fewer and fewer heterosexual couples are getting married. And the ones who are still getting married are the more affluent ones. If you go down the economic scale, you find less and less
Well, maybe
marriage.
It's time to relook at how these institutions serve us as a society. And
well, if we could, what we need to examine is what are the advantages of marriage practically, and can we afford those benefits to people without requiring marriage license?
And the government, for all its rhetoric, does not really support families.
No, it doesn't.
And support people with children.
For instance, it's old welfare laws that penalized a father living with the mother and the children. Right. He had to be out of the house for any benefits to be available. They were splitting up families.
But Tom Amiano has taken the plunge. This is a veteran San Francisco politician, used to be the head of the Board of Supervisors. He's an assembly member, I believe, now, Tom. And he's married his partner, Carolus Deal.
There's also a troubling bit of study data that may or may not be relevant, but the Pew Research Center, whose polls we often take a look at, found a drop in the percent supporting same-sex marriage. It's been skyrocketing over the last 10 years up.
Buyer's remorse?
Unclear. It was a poll that was a lot about religion, so it may be that the question asked in that context drew more religiously conservative-oriented answerers, thereby skewing the poll. It's one poll. We have to look at a bigger trend to say anything about that. We did
win a court case in Virginia, but the Attorney General will not defend it. The House of Delegates there voted 65-32 to hire outside counsel to defend the state ban on same-sex marriage. Now, there's no money for unemployment benefits. There's plenty of money for war, but they've
been wasting money like this for years now.
And okay.
Should we move on to Philadelphia?
Sure.
Well, one of our big stories last week was about a gay male couple who were walking down the street in Philadelphia, were accosted by a group of 10 to 12 men and women in their 20s who...
well-dressed.
And somewhat drunk.
Yeah. And one of them shouted, "Is that your effing boyfriend?"
Yeah.
Which set off an altercation.
Yeah.
Where one of the gay guys ends up with a broken jaw. I mean, his jaw is wired shut. Is horrible pictures.
They were thrown to the ground. They were kicked. They were badly beaten.
We have some video. Should we show the video on the?
Well,
no. Do we?
no.
Well, it's contained in that.
In a minute.
All right.
What we found last week was that there were no arrests yet. There now have been 3 arrests. There was also a guy who was believed to be involved who turned out to be an assistant basketball coach at a local Catholic high school, Archbishop Wood High School. He has been forced out of his job. There may also have been some ex-students of the school involved.
Well, one of the women arrested, Catherine Knott, 24, is the daughter of an area police chief.
Yeah. The Catholic high school says they forced out the coach because all of this is against our values. Yeah. We're firing the teachers because they're getting gay married, as they say. We're firing the music directors. We're firing everyone. But don't think that we're against homosexuality. Well, where could the kids and the basketball coach have gotten that idea?
Yes. Well, they have charged the 3 with criminal conspiracy, aggravated assault, and reckless endangerment.
But there is some dispute because there is no hate crimes law in Pennsylvania that includes LGBT assaults.
Well, none of the alleged perpetrators, they're all saying we're not anti-gay, it wasn't anti-gay.
They're saying they didn't start it.
They didn't throw a punch.
They didn't do anything.
Yeah. But yet this guy, well, you'll see,
So there are a lot of people who are up in arms demanding a hate crimes law. I'm of mixed feelings about that. I mean, these people have been charged with assault. So hate crimes laws are debatable. Some people think they're necessary, others don't like them.
We fought strongly for hate crimes laws when the police didn't take crimes against us, people of color, etc., seriously.
Correct.
That's why we fought for them. Now we are having second thoughts about them as just piling on. If the police are willing to deal with this, that's fine.
That's what we want, is equal treatment of these assaults.
And hate crimes laws are fairly easy things to be for, mostly.
Yeah, and prosecutors, however, are kind of reluctant to go after them on that, or juries are reluctant to convict on them historically. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to go back to the rationale for a hate crime, though, the original thing, and I used to defend them on the radio and stuff, arguing about it with Nat Hentoff and people like that, was to say, look, I mean, think of it this way. If I put graffiti on the side of a supermarket, it's graffiti, it's paint on a building, you got to get rid of it. If I put a swastika on a synagogue, I am sending a signal to the whole community that you're really under attack, and it has a different quality to it.
And it has an intimidating effect on the community.
And they didn't beat these people up, allegedly beat these people up because,
there was an argument.
Yeah. It was because they were gay. And that sends a signal to all of us in the community that we're vulnerable when we're walking, even in the gay district in Philadelphia.
Right. So let's go to the local news report that talks about the arrests and the attempt to make a hate crimes bill, and a little surprise from a state senator from Pittsburgh.
But we're going to begin now with the push for equal protection for all minority groups in Pennsylvania. Lawmakers gathered in Harrisburg today calling for sexual orientation to be added to the state's hate crime law. The rally came hours before the arrest warrants were issued for 3 young people allegedly involved in the beating of a gay couple in Center City earlier this month. 2 men and 1 woman were charged with assault and criminal conspiracy late today, but many say those charges should have been more serious. Action News' Walter Perez live now in the Capitol with more on this. Hi, Walter.
Hey, Brian. And today's rally was designed to promote that message. For those who don't remember, a bill designed to make attacks against the LGBT community a hate crime made its way through the legislature more than 10 years ago, but it got scrapped on a legal technicality. And so, in light of the recent attack and today's arrests, lawmakers say the time is now to expand Pennsylvania's hate crime law. State Representative Dalen Leach, co-chair of the LGBT caucus, says the passage of Senate Bill 42 is long overdue.
What have we not done in terms of our own growth of a society that we still need to pass legislation to say that you can't beat someone up because of their sexual orientation?
Leach is referring to the recent brutal beating of a gay couple in Center City, Philadelphia. That incident served as the backdrop for this rally inside the Capitol Rotunda calling for the swift passage of Senate Bill 42 and House Bill 177, designed to expand the current Pennsylvania hate crime law to include lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender citizens. State Senator Larry Farnese of Philadelphia says the measure makes moral sense and practical sense.
Conditions advocated in these bills strike against not only civil rights, but create an atmosphere in Pennsylvania that is extremely unwelcoming from a business perspective.
Pittsburgh State Senator Jim Furlow, a co-sponsor of the bill, says even if the measure is not passed by the end of the current legislative session, there is no reason why it can't come to a vote during a special session before the end of the year. Senator Furlow also took time to officially come out.
Hundreds of people know I'm gay. I just never made it an official declaration. I never felt I had to wear a billboard on my forehead. But I'm gay. Get over it. I love it. It's a great life.
And it was quite a news conference, I got to tell you. Now, those lawmakers tell me that they're hopeful they will get this bill on the governor's desk by the end of the year. Reporting live from Harrisburg, Walter Perez, Channel 6 Action News. Shirley?
All right. Thank you, Walter.
It's nice to see Mitt Romney getting work there.
I have my questions about Walter, but I like the billboard. I don't have to wear a billboard on my forehead. Billboard story in a second, but still in Pennsylvania. Perhaps we should be prosecuting the principal of South Williamsport High on a hate crimes charge. He ordered the cancellation of a performance of Spamalot by his students because of its homosexual themes. He fired the director. He said he didn't want the school presenting something that parents would be afraid to bring their children to.
Spamalot?
Yeah, Spamalot. I haven't seen it. You know? Oh, you haven't seen it either?
I never saw it.
How amazing. Well, the gay theme is actually that Sir Lancelot is closeted and ends up marrying a man. Heaven forbid. Again, the marriage, you know, you can't get married. So the students rallied. They were appearing at a school board meeting. We'll give you any updates we find on that. And speaking of billboards, the story out of Utah. Let's see this billboard that our team wanted to erect in Utah. There's already one of these up in Topeka, Kansas, by the way.
Which is where God Hates Fags Ministries is headquartered.
Yeah, but this is a beautiful billboard that says, God loves gays, with a big rainbow and a sky and clouds.
People have raised $100,000 to put these things up.
On Indiegogo. But in Utah, the billboard company rejected it, saying it was too controversial in Mormon land. So no billboard in Utah.
At least it's getting a lot of attention.
Yeah. By the way, I was so pleased to see that Cardinal Dolan in New York says it's okay for him to be the Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade with a semi-out gay group in it, non-Irish, the NBC employees.
No. He says they're marching people of Irish ancestry, which is a lie. He told a lot of lies in this.
Andrew Brewer, the head of the NBC group, says he is of Irish ancestry.
And what about the rest of his crew?
I haven't examined their DNA, but that's his. But Dolan says, oh, don't worry, it's okay because actions are immoral. Identity is not. Yeah. So I guess he has surveyed the members of this group to investigate their actions.
We never really were fighting for the right to have sex during the parade, were we? I don't even think we were fighting for the right to have sex during the Pride Parade.
Bill Donahue would disagree with you on that.
Dolan also, first of all, you're a big liar. I'm just going to say it. For you to say, I have absolutely nothing to do with any of these changes, I have nothing to do with the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
I'm restraining myself from the exclamation I want to give.
Then he refers to our banners, where we would say Irish and gay or whatever, as indications of our sexual inclinations. Get with the. You're going to do this right. Get with the program. Sit with some LGBT people and learn how to talk.
He does every day, but they don't tell him about
Thousands of them.
The priests.
Oh, right.
There is a new bishop in Chicago replacing the very right-wing
Francis George.
Yes, who was a cardinal. They've taken
when you got two first names, that's usually something for porn stars. I mean it.
Well, the Pope Francis has appointed the Bishop of Spokane, Washington, Blaise Supich.
Well, that's a better name.
Yeah, to Chicago. He's supposed to be a milder type, but he campaigned against same-sex marriage in Washington. So don't think this represents any change of doctrine.
Look, they choose from within a narrow band of conservatives.
Yes.
Very conservative, extremely conservative, unbelievably conservative. You know, there aren't any liberals anymore in the Catholic Church and the hierarchy.
And again, we're going to have to stop doing these stories at some point because they're so repetitive. In Victoria, Minnesota, the St. Victoria Catholic Church has fired their gay music director because he married his husband.
Who is going to do the music in these churches? You know, they're
well, at least they're being outed. I hesitate to make this analogy, so I'll try to do it in a moderate way. But one of the aspects of the AIDS epidemic that was interesting was that it forced a lot of gay men out of the closet. Sure. And the result of that was the acceleration of the LGBT rights movement as people became more visible involuntarily, but visible.
We used to say in the early days, well, if we all could just turn purple tomorrow, the movement would be won.
Yeah.
And then we did with AIDS. Many.
Literally, sadly.
Yes.
But I wonder whether this forced coming out of these music directors, teachers, priests, whatever.
Will transform the church?
It's an interesting phenomenon to watch. I make no predictions.
And of course, we want the priests to be able to marry their partners too. And you bishops. Who, you know, I used to be told that the Catholic Bishops' Conference, half of them used to bring their boyfriends in the old days.
If you looked at the Grindr statistics at that, it'd be interesting.
Now,
well, I just want to warn people of something to keep an eye on. A couple of religious gatherings coming up. This week, something called literally The Gathering in Orlando, Florida, this weekend, is all the really, really right-wing organizations that evangelize around the world, that are responsible for writing all these anti-gay laws. They have an annual meeting about where they're going to put their money. It's about their philanthropy, but it's all about their political use of their money, and it's...
Don't our side do this too?
Well, we're not out to kill homosexuals.
We're out to do something else, but...
We're not out to kill people.
We get together.
So... The Gathering is something to keep your eye on, and what is particularly offensive to me is that New York Times conservative columnist David Brooks is a featured speaker at this event.
Who acts like he's a very reasonable man. I'm for same-sex marriage. I think it should be mandatory. Blah 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 blah.
No.
Well, also speaking of religion, the Rhode Island Supreme Court this week heard the case of the two firemen who sued because the mayor of Providence, Buddy Cianci at the time.
He's running again. We love Buddy.
Yeah, this is not the gay one, Cicilline, who's now in Congress.
No, Buddy is a legend.
And he has a lousy spaghetti sauce, by the way. Don't buy it. He made them ride a fire truck in the Pride Parade in 2001. So Cianci was in court this week. They say their right to religious freedom and free speech was violated. The city says, we send trucks to all kinds of parades.
Yes. Get over yourselves. All right. Let's see.
Staying in New England for a second, up in Maine, an out guy, Michael Michaud, is up for governor, Democrat. Without support, they're saying, from the big LGBT donors, he would be the first out gay or lesbian person elected governor. But I think people have kind of moved on in a way in terms of where they're putting their money and what's crucial.
I don't know. I think he deserves some support. There's also an independent running who's very progressive. That complicates it. And he doesn't talk about being gay much, so people are not sort of compelled to support him for that. But we got to beat this incumbent Republican governor in Maine, Peter.
Guy.
Very, very bad guy. So whether we support Michaud or the independent, someone's got to get him out.
Okay.
Let's talk about this Facebook thing. Facebook last week announced that everybody who had a Facebook profile had to use their real name, and this upset a number of people, including the drag community of San Francisco and beyond that said, wait a minute, you know, these are real personalities. And
they're saying you can get a fan page, but apparently there's, you know, that makes it more commercial.
It has that possibility, but it also, these guys are saying, I don't have fans, I have friends, and I want to operate as a person in this personality that I use quite openly and commonly on Facebook. And the only reason you want me not to is because you want to collect more data for commercial use, and the hell with you. Facebook claims it's for to prevent bad behavior, for safety and accountability.
Do we run the picture after the meeting?
That's those are some of the complainers and
San Francisco supervisor.
Yes, who met with Facebook. Facebook is standing firm, and they say they're willing to meet again, but and they restored the pages for 2 weeks. But they say, you know, we're cutting everybody off after 2 weeks.
That's right.
I think that's kind of heinous.
We should raise hell.
A couple of little notes.
On Facebook.
I want to recommend to you I told you about the Gathering conference. There's also a new report done by HRC called Export of Hate about people like Scott Lively, who says this report targets him for assassination. Export of Hate at hrc.org gives you a real detailed look at what's going on around the world with these organizations and how they're targeting us. There is a vigil in Washington, D.C. this weekend on Saturday at 4 o'clock outside a meeting of the Congressional Black Caucus, a conference they're having.
It's put on by a group called Black Trans Lives Matter to draw attention.
Black trans women's lives matter.
To draw attention to the epidemic of violence against trans women of color.
It's going to be at the D.C. Convention Center on Saturday at 4 p.m., a vigil and call for peace.
And there were a lot of LGBT people, obviously, in the climate change march. We have a picture, I think, to show there.
Yes, of a contingent called Queer Planet. You were there.
I was amongst it, hardly moved, because the people were so packed in. There were over 300,000 people there marching in New York, and there were people marching all over the world. And it was a very diverse crowd. You know, this wasn't some middle class. You know, this was all kinds of folks marching around that. Of course, then I read the UN report about human-caused climate disruption, which is severe, pervasive, and irreversible. So, you know, I'm not giving up. But it's going to be a tough slog, folks.
Well, part of this happened because the UN's having a big meeting on climate change. Obama showed up at the UN, but he was mostly talking about starting a war in the Middle East again by going after the ISIS or ISIL fighters.
Or ICE.
Whatever. But he did talk about the yearning for peace around the world and what he sees, and included, you know, a long list of people, including no matter who you love or who you are. So we're on the list there somewhere. I'm burying an important story, which is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. We told you last week that Representative Jared Polis, out gay rep from Colorado, had filed a discharge petition on ENDA in the House. It's passed the Senate, but it's passed the Senate in a bad form that has a very overbroad religious exemption. His discharge petition asks for a narrower religious exemption, which would conform to the Civil Rights Act.
And we need a discharge petition because the House Republicans will not take up the bill, and they won't take it up in committee, and they won't vote on it.
But no one takes this discharge petition seriously because they know the Republicans won't sign on to it. It's basically a vehicle to embarrass the Republicans and have an election issue for November. But, and now the 190 Democrats have signed on, a few haven't for various reasons.
We need 218 signatures on it to get it.
Not going to happen, not going to happen. But what may happen, what is more seriously being pushed and was talked about, rumored, is adding the bad end of the original version passed in the Senate to the Defense Authorization Bill for 2015, which will be taken up in the lame duck period after the November elections.
Who would do that to us?
The Democrats.
Well, can't we ask them to vote it? Can't we ask them to?
Yes, and they will ignore us because HRC and
still
Freedom to Work is pushing the bad bill.
Well, it's got to stop.
Even as they talk about, oh, we're going to push a comprehensive bill next year. That's really what we're focused on. They want the win on ENDA. We should continue to tell our senators and representatives we do not want the bad ENDA. We want one, if we want one at all, we want it with the standard narrow religious exemption. But what we really want is to kill the whole thing and start over with a comprehensive bill next year that includes public accommodations, housing.
Congressman Nadler? That's our congressman. We're going to be coming after you because we got him to vote against ENDA when it didn't include transgender.
Right.
And this is what we have to do.
Yeah,
we have
but we need more than Nadler.
We have to peel off. Well, we have to peel off Democratic votes.
We do.
So that we don't get, because folks,
particularly in the Senate,
you do not want bad bills codified for you. It doesn't help us in the long run.
No. Au contraire, it takes us backwards. We want to celebrate Bisexual Awareness Week this week. If you want information about it and various events, you can go to bisexualweek.com. There's also a new report by the LGBT Movement Advancement Project on understanding issues facing bisexual Americans.
That says half of LGBTs are bi.
I think that's a vast undercount.
Well, and yet very few people acknowledge being bisexual.
Well, the newest...
Very few.
The newest
More people acknowledge being gay than bisexual.
The newest headline is Charles Blow, the New York Times columnist, whose new autobiography, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, talks about his bisexuality.
He's married to a woman, but he acknowledges that. He's a great guy. He writes a great column. Charles Blow. Check him out.
Yes.
And the ACLU is suing the Defense Department. We didn't do this, did we?
No, on behalf of Chelsea Manning, who is still not getting treatment for gender dysphoria, not getting the hormones, not getting anything, and so now they're suing the Defense Department.
And the U.S. Senate confirmed out Gordon Tanner as the
I think we did that last week.
Well, no, they were going to, but they didn't do it. He's been confirmed as the top lawyer in the Air Force. He's the first appointee with a same-sex spouse and being a military veteran to be so confirmed. And the Senate Judiciary Committee is blocking Obama's anti-gay nominee, judicial nominee Michael Boggs. Vermont Senator Leahy says the votes are not there. Barry.
Well, as we meander along and time gets short, I want to run through a lot of international news headlines.
Indeed.
In St. Petersburg, Russia, they did have the Queer Fest. It did succeed in happening, although a venue was canceled and then changed. The homophobic crowd showed up, tried to push in. There was back and forth with speakers being pulled in and out. The hooligans showed up to vandalize with the right-wing legislator Milanov. But Queer Fest happened in St. Petersburg.
In India, and we have a picture. They have their first trans TV news anchor. I don't know any here. She is Padmini Prakash, a former dancer and actor. She does the primetime news show on the Lotus News Channel.
She could come sit in for us someday.
Yes, please do.
Please. In Jerusalem, they held a pride march. It was smaller than in the past and had been postponed because of the fighting in Gaza, but there was no violence, no attacks from the right wing as there has been in the past. Go ahead.
No, and also back in Moscow, Rufus Wainwright gave a concert there. He's out gay, and he slammed Russia's anti-gay propaganda law.
Called it disgusting, to a storm of applause.
His people were restricted to over 18s at his concert, which he objected to. He defied the law by announcing his sexuality and calling Tchaikovsky my favorite gay Russian.
And then the debate will continue about whether he should have been there in the first place.
Exactly. Well, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't have time to think about it today.
All right.
In Taiwan, a representative has promised that a marriage equality bill will be introduced in the new session of Parliament, and they're holding rallies in favor of that.
In Mexico, how you say this?
Coahuila.
Okay.
Coahuila.
Which is the state next to Texas there.
I hate these pop quizzes.
Same-sex marriages have begun. In the neighboring state of Durango, however, the First Lady, Teresa Alvarez, said homosexuality was a disease to be avoided, but it can be treated.
She had to move to Egypt, where they are putting on trial 8 men who they arrested because there was this viral video that they posted about a same-sex wedding. They said it was a joke because they don't want to be prosecuted. There's a big action for 2 days this week, tweeting and blogging on the Stop Jailing Gays hashtag. They're being prosecuted for inciting debauchery and offending public morality.
My favorite story of the week is in Brazil. We have a picture of this. First of all, a trans student was fined for wearing a skirt to school. So 15 male classmates, do we have this picture? I hope.
We will in a moment.
Showed solidarity with her by wearing skirts themselves. And the school said, well, maybe we should change our policy.
Maybe they should. Never liked dress codes. In Iran, the cops are arrested a man who was seeking gay sex on Facebook. The cops are taking, as in Egypt, a very close look at social media to try to track down people who want to hook up with each other. Heaven forbid.
In New South Wales in Australia, there's a bill to clear the records of men convicted of having gay sex in the past. 30 years ago, they faced jail time. This is a movement we ought to lead around the world to have these cleared up.
Of course. And while Scotland is not seceding from Britain, the big news on a vote was at the St. Andrews Royal and Ancient Golf Club. We care about this stuff, which voted overwhelmingly 85% for including women in the golf club.
Women were always able to play the public golf course, but they have different clubs there, including women's clubs. And the big club, which is the governing body of golf in Europe, I guess, did not admit women. It's terrible.
I played the golf course 50 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah. Keep your eye on the UN Human Rights Council. They have a resolution condemning discrimination and violence for sexual orientation or gender identity coming up for a vote led by South American countries. But
they're worried about South Africa.
Yes.
South Africa is the first country in the world to put it in the Constitution to protect sexual orientation in 1993.
They're going backwards.
And, you know, that's very bad.
Yeah.
And also in South Africa, the first pro-gay mosque, which is in Cape Town, has been shut down by the city because it didn't have enough parking spaces. They claim it was not a matter of ideology, but it's an open mosque. Women are allowed to pray next to men. Imagine that.
In Curacao, in the Caribbean, you often wonder which Caribbean countries or islands are gay-friendly. Well, Curacao seems to be. They held their second annual Pride event for about 5 days. They are of Dutch heritage, and that's why they are a little more friendly.
And as Anne would say, the gall of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy.
Gall, get it?
Yeah, he accused the government, the current government, of humiliating families and people who love the family by introducing same-sex marriage. First of all, what about our families? And what about your family? You know,
he's only been married 3 times.
Yeah.
Had many affairs.
Big gay activist in Vancouver has died in a freak accident, Jim Diva. He was the co-owner of the Little Sisters bookstore that led the battle over censorship by Canadian Customs, about two-decade battle about importing gay books.
It used to be illegal to send gay books into Canada, and this was a huge, huge battle. And he was a real hero and beloved in Vancouver, and this is a real loss. 65 years old. Fell off a ladder and died.
In Cameroon, 2 men were prosecuted for feminine mannerisms for, drinking Bailey's Irish Cream. You can't make this stuff up.
I'll resist the joke. At the Vatican, they have placed the former papal ambassador to the Dominican Republic under house arrest. He's an archbishop. He's the one who paid young boys for sex in the Dominican Republic. He'd already been defrocked. He's awaiting trial on criminal charges. So everybody says, oh, they finally got one. But really watch out at the Vatican. October 5th, they're having this synod on the family. Everybody's watching this very carefully. You know, what little changes will the Pope make?
Contraception.
He married 20 couples in St. Peter's Basilica, some of whom were divorced or had had their previous marriages annulled or had kids out of wedlock.
That's the purpose of an annulment, so you can get another marriage.
Well,
it's Catholic divorce.
Everybody's watching the tea leaves here.
In Uganda, a friend of mine has a friend there who's a U.S. official who has a Ugandan partner, and he was they were trying same-sex partner. They were trying to leave the country to come over here. They stopped the Ugandan guy at the border and kept him there because they read them as a gay couple and wanted to prosecute him. It took the intervention of the U.S. Embassy to get this guy out and get him out of the country. Wow. Things are really bad there.
And HBO on October 6th will air Hunted, the War Against Gays in Russia. Now, this is actually a British Channel 4 production that aired last year. HBO is running it. They replaced the British narrator with Matt Bomer's voice.
And in the Philippine place of Agusan del Norte, they become one of the first places there to enact protections based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Progress in the Philippines.
And there's fear that Australia will make gay people who are trying to immigrate to Australia, who are seeking asylum, actually go to Papua New Guinea, where homosexuality is illegal.
AIDS news?
Yes.
Speaking of Australia, in Melbourne, a clinic there found that 85% of men who have sex with men who have HIV believe meth was a significant contributing factor to that. So you got to deal with these underlying issues if you're going to stop the epidemic.
And surreal story of the week, Israel and West Hollywood have formed an HIV/AIDS task force. It's about all we know about that.
Read about it online. In San Francisco, Supervisor Scott Wiener, who's out gay, has gone public also about using PrEP. He wants to raise awareness. And activists there are supporting an initiative to make the treatment available for free to those who cannot afford it.
Now, isn't Scott Wiener the one that Michael Petrellis is running against? Well, Michael Petrellis, out HIV-positive man, and Scott Wiener is now coming out about using Truvada.
More on that race later.
New York State is delaying some of the treatment of people with hepatitis C because the drug is expensive. And new infections of HIV in New York City are down a little from year to year. So that's good.
All right, entertainment news.
Yes.
I did see the off-Broadway hit Booty Candy. Its skits, mostly on black gay concerns at Playwrights Horizons, is rather disjointed, but I would say it gathers force in the second half. Scabrous humor, righteous anger. This is by Robert O'Hara. And it's running till the 19th of October.
Friday, October 17th, 7 p.m. on MTV and Logo. Laverne Cox presents The T Word, a documentary on transsexual life.
We mentioned 3 gay awardees of the MacArthur Grant last week. A viewer wrote that there's a 4th, documentary filmmaker Joshua Oppenheimer, who did The Act of Killing.
And his new movie, The Look of Silence, which The Act of Killing is about the Indonesian genocidal attacks. From the attacker's point of view, The Look of Silence is the other side.
And I said George Kelly wrote Philadelphia Story last week. That ain't true. Philip Barry did, of course. And Samuel Hunter, who was another MacArthur winner, did not win the Pulitzer Prize for The Whale. He won a lot of awards. Thank you, Andrew Taines, for all these corrections.
And congratulations to Jenna Wolfe, out lesbian on NBC, pregnant again, and new lifestyles editor. And we are about out of time. Should we debate in 5 seconds whether the Eleanor Roosevelt was closeted by Ken Burns?
I don't think they did enough about her lesbianism. They did quote a lot of the love letters with her and
Lorena Hickok.
Lorena Hickok.
More next week. Thank you.